These are the best and worst legends for Apex Season 19. All of these rankings are based off of the Battle Royale mode as well. Starting off in F tier, first we have Ashe. Now, Ashe received no changes this season, and currently, I think she's the weakest legend out right now. There are some Ashe mains out there who will disagree, but most people know Ashe is in need of a buff. Her portal is pretty underwhelming and doesn't always go where you need it to, especially if you're in a pinch, but at times it can be handy to escape or to be aggressive with when it seems to work correctly. I still enjoy playing her in pubs from time to time, but in high level ranked, she's not a part of the meta, and that's because her abilities become less powerful against better players. They're able to counter her abilities much easier than, say, the average player, and she just doesn't provide a ton of utility for her teammates. Now, as always, you can get something out of every legend, so although Ashe and some of these other legends aren't going to be rated super highly, you can still play them, have a decent time doing so, and probably find some success with them. But with that said, let's talk about D tier. First up is Seer. Seer was nerfed into the ground back a season ago, and you can still find some pockets where he is extremely valuable, particularly like if you're in a building and you need to use his ultimate, you're just not sure where people are at. This will help you out greatly. His tactical can be tough to line up, but if you are successful with it, it could turn the fight in your favor. He doesn't provide nearly as much info as he used to, but he's still a decent legend. We were just so used to an overtuned and overpowered Seer that right now he feels very underwhelming, and that's also why his pick rate is so low. Second in D tier is Ballistic. Now, don't get me wrong, using his ultimate is fun, but overall, he's just not that strong, I'm sorry to say. Having a third weapon through his sling can also be handy, but it's not super easy to get used to having a third weapon, so most players don't tend to use it correctly unless they've clicked his ultimate. Now, I will say his smart pistol that got nerfed last season is pretty underwhelming, so if you are playing Ballistic, it's strictly for his passive and his ultimate, and it's to enhance the gunplay in Apex. It's not always going to win you a fight, but it can help in some fights. However, as you move up the ranks, I think there are a lot of other legends that just provide way more value when it comes to team fighting and the necessary things you have to do to navigate a dicey game. Third in D tier is Octane. Now, I've always rated Octane pretty low, at least the last few seasons, and that's because Octane is a fun legend, but he's not a really strong legend. He doesn't provide much utility for his squad mates besides his jump pad, but there are certainly better means of mobility in the game right now. So he's overall a D tier legend, but if your goal is to just play a fast and fun legend, then Octane is probably the legend you want to go with. However, on the contrary, if your goal is to climb the ranked ladder and you need to find a good legend to play with your squad, Octane is not the pick for that. He doesn't offer much to his squad mates. All right, fourth in D tier is Rampart, and I know a lot of the Rampart mains will disagree here, but Rampart's not a particularly fun legend to play, and she can be kind of awkward to also use if you're not used to her kit. Placing the walls down actively within a fight won't go your way against experienced players. They will know how to counter that. They'll shoot them out very quickly. The best part about Rampart is Sheila, and Sheila is certainly better than D tier, but that's just her ultimate, and you're not always going to be in an able situation to pull out Sheila, have a ton of time to gun someone down, have that revved up, all of that goes with her ultimate. So she's a lower tier legend in my eyes. There are some niche moments where she can be much stronger, particularly holding an area, passively having someone come into that area while you're already set up with your walls or with Sheila, and then she becomes very strong, but we all know a lot of fights in Apex aren't going to be like that, so for that reason, I've got her in the lower tier for now. Lastly, in D tier, I've got Watson. Now, once again, a lot of Watsons will disagree with this, but fighting with her isn't anything special. Teammates often don't know how to play around a Watson. Her combat abilities aren't particularly great unless she has specific areas that she can deny, like a building or something like that. But even with that, right now, there are other controller legends that are just better. Putting a fence down, it's pretty easy to avoid that fence unless you're like riding up a zip line and you don't see the fence and you stumble into it, and Watson's right there to one clip you. You know, comparing her to another controller legend right now, she's by far the most underwhelming one, but there are moments where she can shine, right? Her ultimate can be handy in endgame scenarios if it's able and tucked away to not get shot out, but by and far, she could use a serious buff. And I should just say, a lot of these legends that I'm putting in these lower tiers, this isn't me hating on them. I just think they're in need of buffs when you stack them up against the rest of the legends and how they play out in on the majority of games that I'm in. Right now, I don't think Watson's that strong. And with that said, we're moving on to C tier. First in C tier is Lifeline. Now, there's a rumor going around that Lifeline is going to get reworked. And when that comes, well, we have no idea. But for now, Lifeline is a middle tier legend. People who say she's trash are just flat out wrong in my eyes. You're able to get some pretty easy armors through her ultimate now. It doesn't take a while to get it. Ultimate accelerants will be your friend here. But ultimately, Lifeline is the only legend legend that can have her weapon out and provide some gunfire while reviving her teammates. Each legend has their own unique revive, and I know a lot of people are upset because Lifeline doesn't have her shield anymore and Newcastle kind of got it from her, but Lifeline can hold with her gun out, whereas other legends actually have to still perform a revive animation. So if Lifeline isn't in danger and she's got some safety, her revive is still really strong. Her drone is also helpful for mid combat, but it's still not the best. It would be better if it would move with you, given how we just got a new legend that seems like her tactical is much stronger than Lifeline's. And unfortunately, a portion of the player base abused Lifeline's drone while it was in the storm, so it no longer works there. If that wasn't abused, there'd be a case to be made that Lifeline is better to fight in zone with, but that's gone. So for now, I've got her in C tier. I'm eager to see what they do with Lifeline in the future, and we'll just have to wait and see. Next in C tier is Mirage. Mirage received no changes this season, and although a lot of players will think he's a D tier legend, it's really his ultimate for me that makes him a little bit better than D tier. If you're able to pull off a successful Mirage ult, which by the way is on a really short cooldown, it's only 60 seconds, you will probably have a decent chance at bamboozling the player you're fighting and winning that 1v1. His ultimate will provide some confusion, particularly if that enemy doesn't see you activate it, because there's going to be a lot of audio going on with all of the decoys. There's a lot of visual clutter. It can be tough to decipher who the real one is. It's not always going to be that way, but in certain areas, his ultimate can shine. Mirage also benefits heavily from having very short cooldowns on all of his abilities. Third in C tier is Valkyrie. Now, Valkyrie feels like she's fallen from the meta over the last few seasons, and a lot of that has to do with the nerfs that she's received, but also the addition of evac towers. Basically, you can find an evac tower every single game, and multiple teammates on your squad can have them, which really minimizes Valkyrie's ultimate here. Her passive in the air is really helpful, but if you're all able to get her ultimate through a survival item, there's really not a ton that she can offer. Her tactical is underwhelming, and her passive doesn't have a ton of fuel these days. If you're looking for a moderate mobility legend that can provide some value for yourself if your teammates die and quit on you, or you want to be able to navigate your squad, she's a fine pick, but she's certainly not a meta pick right now. All right, fourth in C tier is Vantage. Vantage received a very small buff this season where she gets 6 bullets in her sniper instead of 5, but I don't think that moves the mark a ton. All right, 6 bullets is like okay, but she's got a huge hitbox, which means she takes a lot of damage in certain instances where other legends just won't. Her tactical is pretty good, but the thing about her ultimate that I think is like too high risk and not enough reward is that with other legends, there doesn't seem to be as much of an emphasis on accuracy. It's more of an emphasis on timing. With Vantage's ult, if you miss a couple shots and you don't have those full 6 shots in the chamber, you're gonna feel like stuck in the middle. Like, I don't have an ultimate here, I have a tactical. It may not be particularly helpful in that instance, so there's just a lot of times where she feels like she lacks some power. Now, don't get me wrong, her sniper is very strong. You can 2-tap people, 3-tap people, whatever, but good players, if they see that beam and they're not distracted with another team, they're just gonna flat out avoid that and not challenge it, and then boom, your ultimate doesn't really have much power anymore. So I'd love for Apex to really dig deeper and figure out a way to bring Vantage more into the meta, because her kit has been pretty underwhelming since release. I would love the idea that if you hit a couple shots, it would reward you with more, but I also would understand that that would make her kind of busted where her ultimate is right now. It would have to tweak the power in it, but to give you some reward for being successful with it. But overall, having a gun as an ultimate doesn't necessarily fit super well in this game, in my opinion. All right, moving down the list on C tier. Next, we've got Newcastle. Now, Newcastle received some small changes this season. They increased the height when he leaps during his ultimate, and they also decreased the time it takes for him to come down and land with that wall out. Now, I will say, if you didn't tell me these changes were in the game and I played Newcastle, I wouldn't have noticed that this was changed. It's a very minuscule change. Obviously, it's helpful, but it doesn't move the mark for me in terms of making him a super meta legend or anything. Now, I will say, if you're looking to embrace the support role and you like bigger legends, Newcastle will be a great pick, right? You're able to pull off some crazy revives with him. If you've got a gold knockdown, this can be really clutch. If you also have a fast sensitivity or play on mouse and keyboard, turning that knockdown while reviving will really make a difference here, as that player you're rezzing won't get thirsted and they can get back into the fight pretty quickly. But overall, there are times where his abilities feel rather clunky. You know, you use your ult to get to a teammate, an enemy gets close, there's a second or two before you're pulling your gun out and ready to fight, know what your surroundings are. All of that for me really takes away how useful he is in the broad amount of scenarios, but he does have niche moments where he can thrive. Lastly, in C tier is Crypto. Now, some of my friends thought Crypto might move up in the tier list because of this new respawn addition that they added, where players now respawn with the armors that they died with, the weapons that they had, along with some ammo, ammo, and of course there's shields and syringes. Right now, players are spawning in with the armor that they actually died with, whether or not that armor was swapped by an enemy or your teammate. So if you die with purple and your enemy took it after they thirsted you, you're still spawning in with purple, which is rather broken. I thought it was going to work like you spawned in with white armor, with your guns, a little bit of ammo, no attachments, and gave you somewhat of a fighting chance off that respawn. However, I believe this will get patched, so for that reason, I don't want to put crypto all the way up in B tier or A tier just because of this respawning component, because that's honestly if you're playing on your heels, right? You've already lost a fight, you escaped somehow, now you're respawning, now you've got to probably fight again because somebody's hunting down that respawn. So this makes him better this season, but we got to wait and see what they do with these respawn changes. Are they going to leave this thing in the game? Are they going to patch it? What will it look like? Beyond all of that, Crypto's not a particularly fun legend to play. He has a low pick rate. He basically always has. There are some Crypto mains who love him, but I think they're just playing him because they like the difficulty of it and they like to kind of be this recon support legend. But most people don't enjoy Crypto. His abilities feel rather clunky to them, you know, pulling out the drone, taking yourself out of first person with your weapon out. All of that stuff really turns people away from this legend. So I've got him in C tier. There are some moments where he can shine, but overall, he's not a meta legend for me. Okay, now getting into the better legends, B tier. First up is Bloodhound. A lot of players don't think Bloodhound is that strong when I rate them in B tier, but I've got to say, the scan, the ultimate, all are super helpful still to this day, despite Bloodhound maybe not being as strong as they once were. Having that ability to track down where the nearest enemy team is through the White Raven is really handy, but ultimately the scan will always provide a ton of information when it comes to team fighting, knowing where all three players are, if there's more than three, what's the layout. It gives you a brief understanding of what you're about to walk into, and that's still incredibly valuable to this day. Next in B tier is Fuse. Now Fuse is a pretty strong legend. Some people love to play him, but let's not pretend like he's amazing right now. He has niche moments where his abilities are all you need to turn a fight in your favor, like knuckle clustering an enemy who's already low behind some cover, using his ultimate in a hectic fight where someone wanders into it. But if you walk around trying to substitute his abilities for your gunfire, you will get outplayed like 9 out of 10 times. That's Fuse's biggest downfall, especially since he takes damage to all of his abilities. Players start trying to knuckle cluster things instead of shooting their gun, and it's really finding that balance of when will this ability actually complement the damage that this legend has already taken, or when can I use this ability to move an enemy outside of their cover and into my line of sight. If you learn to balance that correctly, Fuse can be a menace. Third in B tier is Gibraltar. With his ult getting a reduced cooldown last season and buffs to shotguns all around, Gibby is still a viable pick in Season 19. I know a lot of players don't really enjoy playing him as he feels big and pretty slow to use, but similar to Newcastle, if you want to fulfill that big tank supportive role in your squad, Gibby can be great. Learning to play in and around his bubble can be a very rewarding tactic. The downsides to Gibby though are obviously no mobility, and if you're solo queuing, support legends like him aren't nearly as fun as some other legends. So I've got him in B tier for now. Next is Caustic. Now B tier might be a little high for Caustic because his traps are pretty easy to counter these days, at least in the broad amount of scenarios. They also tend to get bugged around doors at certain times. But Caustic can still be a very viable legend for close combat, especially in endgame circles. With ranked becoming way more sweaty these days, playing Caustic for that last endgame fight can be all you need to win that match. So really think about Caustic on some of these maps in Season 19. Lastly in B tier is Mad Maggie. Now Maggie didn't receive any changes this season, but she's still a decent pick, especially if you want an aggressive legend to play. Her Riot Drill is definitely one of the better tacticals in the game right now. It's great at moving enemies out of their cover when they're low, and although I don't love her ultimate because of its inconsistencies and how it works, I still think she's going to be moderately strong in Season 19. Make sure you're utilizing shotguns with Maggie whenever possible. Moving on to A tier. First up is Horizon. Now Horizon's nerf from last season have definitely taken her down a notch. Her Q isn't as good as it was before. But let's be real here. Any ability that floats you and your teammates up in the air multiple times while still being able to shoot or heal is just flat out a very strong ability in Apex. Her passive also still works really well, and this is especially helpful for all of those gravity cannons now that we're on Storm Point. Her ultimate is still pretty strong. A lot of players have learned how to counter it these days just by simply team firing it. Within a few seconds, it's going to be gone. But if you're able to get a successful one off, as not all players will turn and shoot that ultimate, you can can still see how this will turn a fight right in your favor, especially when paired with some grenades like Arc Stars. I think Horizon's kit overall is just going to be really tough to take out of the meta until they buff some other legends. I don't think we'll see any more nerfs for her, but for now her kit just blends really well with the game. So I don't think we'll see her pick rate go down anytime soon. Second in A tier is Catalyst. Now Catalyst did receive several nerfs this season. First, they made it so that she can only have 2 Qs out instead of 3. Her piercing spikes take pass-through damage, so players can't stand behind it and have it block their shots anymore. And third, her Dark Veil wall doesn't last as long and the cooldown begins once the wall goes away. So basically in every area she got slightly nerfed besides her passive. I still think this makes her the strongest controller legend for the record, but she's definitely taken down a notch. Oh, and also you can't throw her tactical nearly as far. For all of these reasons, I still think you'll see Catalyst played at a high level, but it does open up the potential for some other legends to sneak in and take her place on that squad. Third in A tier is Pathfinder. Now I have a hard time putting Pathfinder any higher than A tier because of his large hitbox, but when it comes to movement and mobility, Pathfinder is really strong, especially once you learn how to master his grapple. He got a slight buff this season where he can scan a care package even if his teammates already have. I know this was a thing if you had a Path on your team, you really wanted Pathfinder to scan that care package so he could get that extra zipline, and now he'll be able to do that even more. For me personally, I think Pathfinder is the most fun legend to play, but as I said, his hitbox can be very frustrating to deal with, as at certain times you'll feel like you're getting beamed where you wouldn't necessarily be taking that much damage on other legends. Last in A tier is Conduit. Now it was tough for me to decide exactly where Conduit should go, as certain parts of her kit feel stronger in different times, but overall I think she's a pretty strong legend, and for a support legend, that's even better. If you really think about her ultimate, it covers a ton of area. It takes a little bit over 200 damage to destroy just one section of it, so this can put a huge emphasis on enemies' gunfire away from you and your teammates if they're focusing on shooting your ult out. And obviously if they don't, then they're getting stunned and taking that damage. Her passive and tactical pair well with that supportive nature, but it's really her tactical here that I'm going to hone in on. The ability to passively heal during a fight, although it's only temporarily, brings in a whole new mechanic to Apex that we just haven't seen and we're just not used to. It's an active medic role, and this really will change how fights play out. Players can challenge on lower health or shield because of Conduit's tactical, and this can allow for some significant outplay here. I do wonder if we'll see her get nerfed in the future, but it probably won't happen for a couple seasons if it ever does happen. The thing about her tactical is it also heals herself temporarily, and that can feel kind of busted. But I will say it's refreshing to see another support legend make their way into the game and actually be very strong. Okay, moving on to S tier. First up is Loba. I know a lot of players don't think of Loba as being this meta S tier pick, but I've kept her in S tier because of the fact with this new respawn edition, as I mentioned earlier, players are able to spawn back with a good amount of their loot now, and even if they change how the armor portion of this works, Loba has been notorious for getting out of fights these last couple seasons, being able to reset and respawn her teammates, particularly in the ranked mode, and this can allow for some things that these other support legends just can't do, right? She's the only support legend that has a mobility tactical. You couple that with the fact that her ultimate can provide a good amount of value for her and her squad mates, getting extra loot, ammo, etc. This can really shape up how your game plays out, especially if you feel like you didn't get good loot off drop. In combat, Loba might not feel like she provides a ton, but it's all those other moments that really make me feel like Loba is an S tier pick, especially for rank. Second in S tier is Revenant. I know a lot of players will disagree with this because Revenant has already seen a couple nerfs since he's been reborn, but I still think his ultimate is a pretty free ability, right? You can activate that during a fight and you're getting that extra HP, and yes, your hitbox is a bit bigger, but it can really just swing the fight in your favor instantaneously. His tactical kind of feels like a different version of Vantage's, so I don't know, it's kind of mid for me. I know there's some different movement that is attached to it for mouse and keyboard players, but overall it's really his ultimate here. His ult can just swing that fight in your favor completely. It's a free aggressive ability, and there's not a ton of risk that's involved with it. You do have to temper expectations and be careful how quickly you're going in versus where your squad mates are, but overall it's still very, very strong. Third in S tier is Wraith. Now Wraith got a slight buff to her passive where it should activate quicker than in previous seasons, will be more reliable, and I have experienced this so far. It seems to work out very well. But Wraith's tactical and ultimate are very strong abilities, right? We all know about the sweaty TTV Wraith out there, and that's because Wraith can get out of situations very quickly. She's able to reset and recuperate. She can bring her squad mates with her if she decides to portal, and of course they've buffed her portal over the past few seasons, making it more and more in line with really what it should be. So I've I've got her in S tier for Season 19. And lastly, I've got Bangalore. I saw a lot of people overreacting to the nerfs that Bangalore received this season. You can't really notice the nerfs all that much. I mean, if these changes were made and not mentioned, I'd bet only like 2% of the players would have picked up on it. She got a slight nerf to all 3 abilities, her passive, her tactical, and her ultimate. Her passive double time was reduced down to 2 seconds. It previously was 3 seconds. Her smoke launcher lifetime, basically how long the smoke lasted for, has been reduced down to 18 seconds. It was previously 23 seconds. And the stun from her rolling thunder, which is her ultimate, was reduced down to 6 seconds. It previously was 8 seconds. So overall, these changes don't move the mark a ton. I mean, yes, they might be felt a little bit, but I don't think this is nearly enough to take her out of the meta during Season 19 unless some other legends get buffed and could find a spot to replace her on a squad. Overall, these do not remove Bangalore out of the meta. Bangalore is one of those mirror meta picks, right? So if a certain amount of squads in a lobby have a Bangalore, it's going to be really common for that squad to then feel like they need a Bangalore if they didn't already have one. When you get smoked and you can't see, you feel like, dang, we need that ability. It's similar with Bloodhound. So I still think we'll see a ton of Bangalores this season. You can't really notice the nerfs a heck of a lot. You're not going to be able to get digital threats as often, which may affect this as the season plays out. But for now, I still seen a ton of Bangalores running around, and I don't really see how she could be removed out of the meta right now. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn all about 2 tips for every legend in Apex, I suggest you check out this video next. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.